And we're live. Hello, it's Melinda Kunst. I am joined, of Hope When There Was None, I am joined by Cheri today, who is a relationship expert. Oh my gosh, she's amazing. She has 20 plus years of helping couples stay together and having that close, also a connected relationship. And you've been married for over 20 years as well. You're a homeschooling mom, veteran psychotherapist. I hope I said that right.
Yep.
Okay, Wonder Woman.
I just like to be busy.
Yes, you are. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to dig into relationships. And you are my resident relationship expert. So I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Well, where do you want me to start? Um,
Well, you know what? We talk a lot about domestic violence and so on and so on. So let's start with those relationships, maybe that aren't so normal.
well, there are a lot of relationships that have a lot of relationship problems, and they run the gamut from just not quite being connected or communicating well, but then all the way down to couples with lots of chaos and even violence uh, and abuse as part of it. So when we talk about marriages, you can't just talk about them all as if they're all the same.
Right.
The Gottmans talk about the masters and the disasters. And like, so you've got every place in between with that.
Ooh, okay. Like I know of for sure of a few people off the top of my head that have relationship issues where the other partner is just not communicating, or they might have an illness and they have almost like a PTSD from that chronic illness and now they're not talking and they've kind of secluded themselves. And actually, I think that's more common now that I think about it with quite a few people that I just know of in general. And
Yeah, I think we think about relationships, especially a good relationship, as always being in sync.
right.
And that's not really the case. I think of it like you're walking down a path together, and sometimes one partner gets ahead, or one falls behind, or one goes on a little side trail. And the idea is to keep coming back together so that you have these points of connection. So, yeah, a chronic illness is going to be one of those side trails that really you can only go on by yourself. Your partner can witness it, but they can't live it. So that can be a point of disconnection.
Okay. Okay. And that's hard. I mean, because I know you don't might not wanna leave that person because that's the only issue that you have is this chronic illness, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but it can lead to lots of other sorts of
okay.
problems. When a couple starts to get disconnected, then their communication, they start to feel disappointed or hurt by the other person. They feel lonely in the relationship. So a lot of a lot of times I hear people say those are signs that they're not a good fit together. And to
Hmm,
me, that is a sign that you need to do the things that get you reconnected.
gotcha, okay, and so what do you don't wanna take a person kicking and drag I've always been under the assumption that when we have to go through our stuff, our, healing process and so on, we need to do that work, but what if you have a person that isn't doing anything, you know what I mean, to make themselves better?
So is that when one partner's working on themselves, but the other partner is not, or when
Right.
they won't address a problem?
Actually, both.
Okay. When one person is doing their own work and the other partner is not, it's tempting to think that that partner is not doing what they're supposed to.
Okay.
That a good relationship means that you're both working on yourselves at the same rate. What I have found though is very often couples are much better off if one is doing personal work while the other one is kind of stable.
Okay.
And then after they get stable, then the partner who was not working on themselves, then there's room for them to do that. Because when both partners are doing that intensive work, sometimes that means that nobody is stable.
Ooh.
And so you really do want someone who's grounded and able to be the anchor in the relationship. So often I think it's good that they're not both working on issues at the same time.
Ooh, that's really deep. Wow, thank you for that. That is very deep. So, what does okay, let's talk about normalcy. What does a normal and again, you're right. We all have our stuff in our relationships. Nobody out there has a perfect relationship. But what does a normal for somebody that doesn't know what a normal relationship looks like? What is it supposed to be like? Or I know there's no guidelines for this, but coming out of a domestic violence situation, going into what I call a normal relationship is like surreal and like night and day. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I have two rules of thumb with this.
Okay.
One is you want someone who brings out the best in you. And when you think about a domestic violence situation, you can clearly see that it's not bringing out the best in each person.
Right.
So that as one measure of, does this person encourage me to grow? Do they help me be my best self? So that is one measure. The other rule of thumb is my definition of true love. And I'll be honest, I didn't come up with this. I realized this because of the way my husband loves me. We
Oh,
tend to think of we tend to think of true love as loving our partner for their strengths and despite their weaknesses. But I think that true love is loving your partner for their strengths and their weaknesses because that's what makes up who they are.
ooh.
So it's not that so if you're with someone and it's really hard for you to love their weaknesses, that either means that you need to do some personal growth, which is sometimes the case, or it is that they are not really bringing out the best in you. They're really doing some things that you can't live with.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So that would be different. That would be different. And I just noticed I have the wrong banners up and I just corrected that. I just realized it. Oops, sorry about that.
Oh.
Okay. Wow, that's really deep. I love that idea. I mean, I love that. Just I hadn't thought about that before. I mean, there's nothing really that like with Mr. Awesome, my husband Terry, that don't make me love him any because of his weaknesses any less. So, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and my husband can get on my nerves with a lot of things, but they're also his personality quirks, and they're things that I can live with.
Gotcha. Okay. And you guys you've been a rock solid marriage for 20 plus years. Well,
Well, there
you
are no rock solid marriages. There are very, very good marriages, but I have never met a couple who has not been through the ringer.
Mhm.
Now, most of the time, you want that to be a crisis that's outside of the relationship. It's
Okay.
not between the two of you. But I have never met a couple who didn't go through seasons of their life that were really challenging, and even times when they questioned whether this was going to work.
Mhm.
So my husband worked our away from home for 2 years, and those were tough,
Wow.
tough years. And then we've had some major illnesses that really put some pressure on our relationship. So yeah, I think that we are a very solid couple, but it doesn't mean that we didn't face hardship.
Oh, thank you for sharing that really and truly. Thank you. I know sometimes as a person looking on the outside to somebody else's life, it looks perfect. And so,
Our
yeah,
Facebook marriages where you
exactly.
only post the good, and then you go back to your real life and you're like, "Oh my goodness, if anyone saw this, they would think it's a disaster." And I just think all of us, to some degree, have messiness in our relationship. Even the very, very best relationships do.
Oh, yes. Oh, so what if, and we just talked about this briefly before we went on, what if there's somebody that just can't get over their partners, they're harboring some negative or some animosity towards them, some negative feelings. What can we do maybe to overcome that? Is there hope?
There is hope. So there's two scenarios when someone can't let go of something that happened, some
Okay.
hurtful thing. Oh, well, even before I get to that, let me just remind you
Sure.
that every couple is going to hurt each other.
Mhm.
That is an inevitable part of being in a relationship. You can't be that close to someone without them saying the wrong thing or hurting your feelings or not showing up for something that's important. So every couple has to get over that stuff. They have to repair those things in the relationship.
Mhm.
But there are times when it's really hard to let go of that resentment that builds up. And there's two scenarios. One is where the partner recognizes what they've done and takes accountability for it, and then they make amends in the relationship.
Okay.
And letting go of resentment in that scenario is really about the individual person that's holding the resentment. But there's the other scenario, and that is where the partner is not repentant or they
Mm.
keep doing the same thing again and again. So it is really important to figure out which scenario you're in, because sometimes that resentment is reminding you that this is someone who you really can't trust to that degree.
Right.
And so it's not just in reaction to what they did, it's also self-protection. And in that case, letting go of that resentment, there are reasons to,
Mhm.
but letting go of that resentment then makes you vulnerable in a way that's not really safe.
Oh. And I know I can attest to actually feeling a little of both of those at one point in time. Not with my current relationship, but with the previous one. Definitely. So what is a good way to, I mean, do we go out on dates? Is there, how do we connect? Do we, it's just having conversation? How do we find that connection to our mate, especially if it's been lost?
So, in terms of just letting go of the resentment, which
Mhm.
is a big piece of this,
Right.
there are a couple of specific things that you can do to let go of that. And then I'll answer the connection question because
Okay.
it's a little bit different.
Okay.
So, one of the things, if you're in that camp where you know that they really are repentant and that you guys are working on repairing the relationship, but you can't let go of that hurt and bitterness and resentment that's built up. Some things that you can do. One would be to reframe the behavior. Now, this is not to make excuses for their behavior, but this is to put it in a bigger context.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Another tip is to practice gratitude and appreciation.
Mm.
When you look for the good in your partner, you're much more likely to see it. There generally is good there. Now, that's not so that you dismiss the bad stuff.
Okay.
That's so that you look, we tend to get super focused on the bad stuff. When you practice gratitude, it's like you look at the whole picture. So you let that good and bad sit next to each other. It's not that the good wipes out the bad, it's
Mhm.
you let them sit next to each other.
Ooh. I'm sorry. That's deep. Go ahead.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
third tip is to forgive them for not being perfect. Like they're going to mess up. Even in trying to make repairs, they're not going to do it perfectly. So, forgiving them for not being perfect, sometimes that helps you let go of that resentment.
Oh.
Okay? And then the fourth tip is to plan the things that matter the most to you. Don't let your needs go unmet in the relationship.
Mm.
If you need a hug, initiate a hug. And that keeps you from sitting there waiting for your partner to read the situation right and to give you the thing that you need. So those are my suggestions for letting go of the resentment.
Well, I like that, especially I like them all, but that last one I really like because I know even in myself, I look, I kind of psychically try to send these messages and telepathically send them to my boyfriend. I need this now. And it was a coconut cream pie for me today, and I got it, but sometimes those little messages don't seem to work. So yes, verbalizing, 'cause he can't read my mind, sometimes I'm glad. But
Oh,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, and I mean, even my husband and I have been together for over 20 years, and there are times that I catch myself saying, "Man, how do you not know in 20 years that this is what I need?" But, then I need to like calm down a little bit and be like, "Okay, that's it's not that important to him because that's not what he needs." And if I give him that power to hurt me around that, then I'm just kind of setting us both up for failure. And so just making sure that those things happen and I don't let us hurt each other around the stupid trivial details of life.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. And I love that all of this because it seems so easy to do. Really, a lot of this, but it can be a lot of internalizing and work that you need to do on yourself, such as if there was an infidelity to forgive. Sometimes that is the hardest thing to forgive is when they've stepped out on you. So finding that forgiveness in your heart, that's hard.
A lot of forgiving them is about not carrying the burden yourself.
Mhm.
I love that old saying that uh, unforgiveness is like poisoning yourself and hoping that the other person feels it.
Oof, I never heard that before. Wow. Okay. Wow.
All right. So then your other question was about how to feel connected with your partner.
Right.
Um, there are hundreds of ways to build connection with your partner. And the best ones are the ones that are unique to the two of you.
Mhm.
They're the inside jokes, they're the things that are your thing. So, those are really easy to do in the very beginning of the relationship. And if you start to feel disconnected, sometimes looking at the things that you did at the beginning of the relationship holds the keys for where you connect. But of course, people change. So we're
Yeah.
always looking for new ways of connecting. You're just looking for ways of connecting that meet both of your personalities. So, like my husband and I go out to dinner for most of our dates.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people would be bored with that. We're not.
Mhm.
So we don't even have to go to new restaurants all the time. We're probably just boring, routine people. But because it's okay for both of us, that's a really good connecting activity for us. Other people might need it to be new restaurants or might need sometimes a, a dinner date, sometimes a walking date, sometimes a sitting and talking date or a movie date. So whatever it is that fits both of you. Um, so in terms of me saying these are the things to do to connect,
Mhm.
there are lots of things to do. Talking is the most common way that people connect.
Right.
That's how you can know what is in your partner's head. But if you're not good at talking, there's lots of other ways of connecting. You can share a hobby, you can be present at events together. Having fun together is a good one. Resting together, just hanging out and goofing off.
I like that one. I like that one. Oh, those are great ideas.
Physical touch is also connecting, particularly for people that it's very important with. Now, of course, when you have trauma in your past, that may turn that on high or that may turn that completely off. So that's where unique unique connection between the two matters, where you're looking for the things that actually are connecting. Eye contact. Oh my goodness. How often does a partner walk in the room and we're so busy on our phone or we're so busy doing what we're involved in that we don't stop and look at the other person and make eye contact? There is
Hmm.
such power in eye contact and looking happy to see the other person. And I think it's a real missed opportunity.
So after this, you know what I'm gonna do. Run down there and see my husband, look at him, gaze at him across the room.
Hey, how many of us connected with our partners in the beginning with that intense eye
Mm,
contact?
that's
And
true.
then we let that drop off, particularly when couples have little kids. I know when I had little kids, I was always looking down and I had to intentionally look up and make eye contact with him. Otherwise, I'd forget. I mean, you forget that they're there. I don't know that maybe that's not the right wording to that, but
Oh, no, no, I think that's lovely, and before with my situation, I was always, with my previous partner, it was, more of a to get that eye contact, it was always a fear for me, so I still work on and struggle with doing the eye contact. It's funny that you mentioned that. I was thinking of that the other day where I struggle with that. That's something that I do struggle with, and not that I don't love to, I do, but that little voice in my head is one that just sees, is he looking at all my flaws? So I have a hard time keeping that contact. I usually have a tendency to look down, and not just with him, sometimes with other people too. I have a very hard time with that. So that's something I'm going to work on. I'm going to start gazing at him and his lovely blue eyes.
But
Yes.
remember, you're looking for the thing that's unique to the two of you. So
Mhm.
that may not be that important to him. And if it isn't, then you'd be doing it for your own personal growth, but maybe not because that's a thing that's going to make you feel deeply connected.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
So, what's your favorite way to connect with your partner?
Oh, I love, we talk and we do a lot of talking, and we're like peas in a pod. And, yeah, so we do a lot of talking, we go antiquing, we go out to eat sometimes, and, new places for us. We do have a few places we go normally, but, we like just getting in the car and just going sometimes, just going, I don't know, sometimes we'll do, "Hey, go left, go right." We'll just pick that way until we're in some little town that we've never heard of and, stop and see the sights. I mean, we're pretty much home buddies, so we just play cards and go for a walk in our around our house, around the property, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It's always nice when we've chosen a partner who likes a lot of the same things. It
Yeah,
makes that connection stuff easier. It is a little more of a struggle when you choose someone who is very different than you.
mhm,
Finding those unique points of connection are a little bit harder, but it doesn't mean you can't. Obviously, you did that in the beginning of the relationship, so they're there.
right, right, and I've thought about that too, because there's a friend of ours. They're man and wife, they're couple, and he is a sports nut and she isn't. So I was even thinking to myself, man, I don't know if I'd want to be married to someone that's into sports like that. I just counted my blessings because here she is home alone and she wants him to be home more, but yet he's out doing the sporting thing and tailgating parties or whatever else goes along with that. So yeah, I count my
Yeah.
blessings.
And the question then is that a phase that they're in, or is that a real difference between the two of them? And then how do they find those points of connection that that take the intensity down on that conflict?
Right. Right. And it seems really sad, especially if you have a partner that does something like that and they don't maybe share the same interests, or the other partner doesn't care that the other partner doesn't like their interests, and they kind of almost seems like they drifted apart.
Yeah, I think though that the when couples fall into that, they're missing the variety of other ways that they can be connected.
Mhm.
Sometimes when couples get gridlocked into an issue, then they're like, this is one solution, this is the other solution, and they forget that there might be 10 other solutions to that. So when you look at those other options,
Mhm.
she wants him to stay home. He wants to go to sports. When you look at the other options, it might be that sometimes she goes with him. Sometimes he misses things. Sometimes they go out to eat or for coffee right before he goes to an event so they feel connected.
Mhm.
Sometimes they'll clear a day so it's just the two of them, or they'll have a trip that makes them feel really connected that then every day doesn't have such a strain on it because they feel really connected. So I think looking outside that gridlock of just having two solutions, that's
Mhm.
where that's where you can find those connections.
I'm sort of thinking of, I don't know if you've seen Fried Green Tomatoes?
Mm,
Yes, where Kathy Bates is trying all these things to, just to get that romance and that relationship alive, but yet, she's got this beautiful dinner and her husband takes it from the table that's beautiful and just sits in his armchair with the sports on and a beer and just glances at her. Oh yeah, thanks, babe. That's it.
yes, that's very frustrating. It's
Yes.
hard to feel like you're the one who's doing all the work.
Right.
Yeah. So we're not supposed to do all the work. I do
Okay.
work with women whose husbands won't work on the relationship.
Mhm.
And a lot of that work is in setting better boundaries with what you'll put up with and what you won't.
Okay.
And women who do that actually end up doing less of the work in the relationship because they stop rescuing their spouse and making their life easier, thinking that they're helping the relationship.
Ooh, what does that look like for somebody that might be a little timid and may not want to share those boundaries with her partner? How would you even broach something like that?
Well, you would have to I see this as a slow process. You don't just go home one day and say, "All right, I'm done doing your laundry. I will never do your laundry again because every time I do your laundry, I feel resentful." Okay.
All right.
I see this as a little bit more gradual than that.
Okay.
One of the reasons that couples get into this dynamic, particularly where women are doing too much, is because they don't want to see something go undone
Hmm.
or they don't want to see something fail. So when their partner doesn't do something, they step in and they do it. So part of the work is identifying the places where you can let it be a mess and let your partner struggle with learning what they need to learn. So in my household, there came a time when I was burnt out
Hmm.
cooking. I got really burnt out cooking. And so one of the things that I had to do was to kind of step back from that role
Hmm.
and let the rest of the family figure out how they were going to manage meals without me stepping in to just take care of it. Now, they were not happy about that. They were not like, yay, we get to make dinner. Yay, we get to find recipe. No, no, they did not do that. Instead, they had to, it would get to be 5 or 6 o'clock, and they'd be like, "Oh, there's no dinner. What are we going to do about this?" I'm like, what are you going to do about this?
Good for you.
And so they had to be a little bit uncomfortable
Mhm.
before they would take that. But I had to be okay with them being uncomfortable.
Okay.
And that's hard.
Yeah, that is hard because I know as myself, I would rather just, oh no, I'll just do it, even if I'm tired,
Right.
exhausted. Wow, that had to be a very hard, lot of restraint.
Yes, it's a different kind of work.
Mhm.
We think of it being the work of making dinner, but it's also the work of standing back and letting there not be dinner. And what does that mean? And watching them maybe even make some choices around food that you would not want them to make, eating things that maybe aren't as healthy. You would have made a very healthy meal. They'll do something that's quick and easy because, you know, they didn't plan ahead.
Mhm.
So like being able to take that step back and being okay with that. So sometimes women need to get involved in something else. So that's not such a hard thing to do. So for me, I didn't stand in the kitchen and watch them fall apart with a meal.
Mhm.
I went and did some other things so
Oh,
that, you know, I
right,
didn't rescue them.
right. I do have a question for you, and it's just popped up. Every once in a while, I'll have a gentleman reach out to me, that's actually the scenario that you're explaining with maybe the partner that's not doing the work is the wife. And it's the flip side. Like he might be trying to do his best. It might be a verbal situation or an emotional situation where there's a little bit of abuse, or she might just be somebody that has a short fuse. So, what can men do, especially since we don't always hear about that side? That what can they do to keep that marriage together and I don't know, keep the love flowing, keeps the relationship going? Is it something similar that us ladies would do?
Yeah, it is something similar, although it's a little bit different. So, in my therapy practice, I have worked with a lot of men who
Okay.
are working on their relationship. It's one of my secret favorite kinds of clients.
Ooh.
Um, Men actually have a lot more ability to change their relationships than women do. I I I don't wanna get into all the reasons why that is. There's some
Okay.
cultural reasons, there's some power dynamic reasons, but they actually have more ability to change their relationship than women do.
Okay.
And so for men, they can say, this is what's going to happen. And often they can then make that happen. Now, in terms of a wife who's kind of checked out or has different expectations around what's going to happen or is dealing with her own problem,
Mhm.
like each of those are a different set of things that a husband would have to do in order to keep the relationship together. So, really understanding what is going on for her so that he knows whether he needs to support her or set some better boundaries,
Mhm.
or the same as I was talking about before with the wife who needs to like let her, I, I don't like the word fail. I don't
Mhm.
like the word let her fail, but let her clean up some of the mess and not rescue.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't like that word failure either, or fail.
Yeah. It's just
Yeah,
messy.
it is.
Relationships are messy, change is messy, and there's not really a way to live without it
The
being
mess.
messy.
Okay. Okay. Wow. That was a lot of great stuff.
This is one of my favorite topics. I know I can go a little bit in depth and in deep with all this stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of which, you do have a date night community.
I do. It's
What
one of
is
my
all that?
favorite places to hang out. If
Okay.
you want to actually interact with me, not in one of my programs, that's probably the best place.
Okay.
It's a group that's designed to encourage couples to spend some quality time together each week.
Okay.
And I put some conversation questions in there every week
Mhm.
so that when you spend that time with your partner, you can have some fun and engaging questions that you can
Ooh.
talk about, things that you wouldn't normally talk about.
Ooh, that sounds really cool. I'm gonna have to check that out. And all the links to her are in the comment section. The right links. They're in the comment section. Oh, and your website. Do you have anything? We do have all those great links. Where to contact you? Do you have anything upcoming? Anything? Any juicy programs that are coming up soon?
There are some really good guides on my website that are free.
Okay.
Listeners can check them out. But I have something that's launching next week. I'm really excited about it.
Awesome.
I put together a free mini course on your partner had an affair, now what?
Oh, ooh.
And it is really designed for that partner who just learned that their husband or wife had an affair
Okay.
and their life is just like completely upended.
Right.
And I pulled together all of the wisdom of having sat with couples for the last 20 years as they go through that moment. And that's going to be available next week.
Oh, that's gonna be so powerful. I'm gonna have to grab that link from you and put that on here. Is that mini course going to be just for a limited time, or is that going to be something that you're going to keep
It's my
going?
intention to keep it as
Okay.
a free thing. It's it is my mission to help couples have really good relationships. And I think that there are certain things that should just be available to everyone. That it shouldn't be something that you would have to have the right coach or therapist for, or that you should have to purchase. And I think that when you're in that level of crisis, you should have access to good materials that are going to help you walk through that and not feel so alone or so overwhelmed.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So look for that, whoever is listening out there on the podcast or watching in the video on YouTube. Please look for that link. I'll go ahead and update that next week. Great. And again, show her some love. Her links are in the comments, or I'll have them within the broadcast descriptions if you are on the podcast or on YouTube. But thank you for joining me today, Cheri. This was marvelous. I got a lot of great tips and things I'm going to use. I'm going to start looking deeply into my husband's eyes from across the room. I
I
will have to
love
let you
it.
know how that goes. Yes, I'll let you know how that goes.
Thank you so much for having me. I just so appreciate the work that you're doing. You're getting information out to people who really need the support, and that is so valuable.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I wish I could say I know it all, but I don't. So that's why I have experts such as yourself and other people come on and share their stories or great insight, because I learned again a lot of great gems. So thank you. And again, give her some love, comments. By all means, check the comment section as well for those links. Have a great rest of your day, and stay safe. Bye bye.